Whoa. That worked. Well, this is the final installment to the work. It's going to be done on my locomotive here, my Broadway Limited New York Central J-1e Hudson Steam Locomotive. I'm going to engine down. Okay. What I want to talk about is the final chapter, which is the detailing of this little guy right here. Now, because this is so small, and during the painting and weathering and whatnot, finishing segments, my hands were in the way a lot of the time. For that, I do apologize, but we work with our hands. Some of us have got bigger hands than others, and so it kind of dawned on me to go ahead and do the detailing steps in more of a photo show or a slideshow, using close-up photographs of the process. I'd also like to point out that some of the things that help during are some good books, and there are some very good books on the subject. One, which deals exclusively with the Hudson locomotive, is the book called Thoroughbreds, and it's done by Alvin W. Stauffer. He self-published the book. This thing is chock full of photos of Hudsons in action, along with some of the history of New York Central. It has some great shots of the steam locomotives moving down the track. It has steam locomotives sitting on the tracks, great close-up shots and whatnot. Some other books which are very, very helpful I found. One is a little book called Rails Along the Hudson. It also is loaded with photographs. It's mostly about the history of New York Central along the Hudson River, but there are some good photographs in here as well. Another book are Memories of New York Central System by Arnold Haas. Again, this is basically the history of New York Central. There are many, many, many fine photos in here as well. Some of them are not found in Thoroughbreds. Many of them are. Another good book is Steam Power of the New York Central System, Volume 1, Modern Power, 1915 to 1955. This is another book by Alvin Stauffer. Again, black and white photos, very good reference. There are Berkshires covered in here as well. One of my favorites is this little book. I got this online, I believe. It's a New York Central System book, the New York Central Trackside, with Eugene Van Dusen. He's the guy who took the photos. The book was written by Bill Marvel, and the neat thing about this is the photos in here are all in color. Now, color is good, but it needs to be taken with a grain of salt, because color film stock back in the day, in the old days, was not as good as what we have just back in the 80s, 90s, and the 2000s. It's far superior to the film stock we had during the 1970s, what I call the crummy or crappy 70s film stock. But anyway, that all being said, this part of the series is going to concentrate on detailing the exterior of my little Broadway Limited New York Central J-1e Hudson Steam Locomotive. That includes doing the little marker lights, the drop-down coupler, and its coupler bar system for recovery. There are on the engineer side, there is the loco valve pilot, cam box, and the friction wheel that go to. It's essentially the black box of early steam locomotives. They had one. Okay, that was cool. And the neat thing about all this is the education, the learning curve, the learning that you develop through study of these locomotives, and it's really interesting the advancements they made. Later detailing on this locomotive will include interior cab detailing, which will include installation of the overhead throttle, the loco valve pilot gauge inside, the gauge faces, which at first I was just going to paint white and then kind of like try to put little hash marks, slash marks on them. But I've discovered what I'm going to do instead. I'm going to scale down photos of real gauges and put them on the face of the gauges in the cab and in the castings I'm going to be using. Let them dry. Once they're dry, I'll give them a coat of clear gloss acrylic. And there are other little details, the rear device, the rear air device, the braking devices. Those are all going to be done inside the cab. And that's mostly for my own personal satisfaction. I can tell you, approaching these things, I approached it with a lot of trepidation. I'd never painted and then weathered and then finished an expensive locomotive. And for me, a $300-400 locomotive is an expensive locomotive. It's a little investment, and I didn't want to ruin it. And so far, knock wood, I have not ruined him. So the addition of these other parts was kind of like the evolution in this hobby and with working with a small locomotive. Will I do a slideshow of the details in the cab? Probably not. I'll most likely just take the photos in close-up in macro photography and put them together in the album for my locomotive. But that all being said, I appreciate all of you who came along with me on this journey of learning. I hope you enjoyed it. I enjoyed nearly ruining my locomotive several times, but he's still running. So I did something good along the way. I did something right. And enjoy the rest of this presentation on detailing the exterior of a steam locomotive. There are so many different things you can do with them. It's really fun, and I urge everyone to give it a try. So until I see you all again, toodaloo.